Hey guys, I'm Fat Buddy Cat, and this is a down and dirty Z50R. Today, we will be working on the right side of the mini bike and our Lifan 125. Our primary objective is to install this ultra budget exhaust system. I don't know how this product got as many reviews as it did, let alone positive feedback. Apparently, this is a universal fit for multiple size engines with this style flange. Okay. The bend looks a little off. The exhaust systems that I've seen for this bike seem to go up and then come back flat. This one definitely flares up, so that's going to be a problem. This heat shield, well, we're just going to get that out of the picture anyway. Hopefully we can remove these bolts and there's no holes there. This flange seems a little bit long. It's definitely longer than stock. This muffler, silencer, it's all aluminum. I put a magnet to it, and I think the only thing I was grabbing were those rivets. Maybe the screen or something inside, but that means I can't weld it. Not sure if I can weld this anyway. It's pretty thin. It is definitely plated somewhat. And, well, this is only held on by that threaded hole right there. And traditionally there would be a set screw there. This didn't come with one. Wouldn't be too hard to match one up, but even for as light as it is, I don't see that holding this on that pipe very long. That didn't give me much resistance. They just tack welded these nuts from one side. It's kind of hard to get you in focus with all the shine, but you see that there? So basically those nuts were threaded on to these bolts and held in place and then tacked. Beautiful. If you look at the end of that flange, in comparison to this one, you can see what I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure the factory exhaust isn't even an option at this point. I was thinking maybe, just maybe, I could cut it off here and then do my own thing from there out. However, it's still in the curve there. It's not really flat, and it's just going to give me trouble. They're both going to give me trouble. I think this one's going to give me less though. This is what the flange looks like when it is completely pushed into the exhaust port. that is without a gasket. If we were to try to put our nuts on, you can see that we're not going to be able to close that gap. I'm not sure that adding washers is the best idea, but technically, as long as we have enough threads, right, and we seat the gasket, that'd be a lot easier than trying to cut that end square again. I have my nuts on, holding this thing in place. Again, there is no gasket. I do have them ready to go from when we need them. This strap also came with this, and I believe it just wraps around and then you find somewhere that you can bolt it. You can see just how drastic that upward angle is. The exhaust that they make specifically for these frames comes down level over the top of the engine. They end up somewhere right around here. Before we can cut it to length though, we're going to have to correct that bend. I'm all set up in the vise. I'm ready to heat this bend up and pull the curse off of it. At the same time, I'm going to take advantage of this vice's clamping capabilities, and I will buzz these nuts off with a micro disc. Now I'll just take my angle grinder with a flapper wheel very lightly to those tacks. Sweet. Now we can heat it up and try to give it a bend. I just have one nut holding this on. There's definitely a drastic change happening. I don't want to take any more out of this bend. There seems to be another little one right here. I'm going to heat this up and try to bend that a little more flat. This time I have two nuts on. I'm all done bending things. I feel like if I go any more, I will really be pressing my luck. If we take our fart can and hold it up in its respective position, we can see that we need to be right about there. When it pulls out a little bit, it comes up off of the engine. We're going to try to mount off of this. So I want that somewhat in the center, but where we're right on this bend, I can't cut it there. I don't think we want to come way back here because then we're going to be on top of our oil filler. Well, we can always go long and then short, right? So I'll go about an inch and a half past my engine. I'll make a mark and go lock that off. So close. I'll take just a little bit more. No matter how I try to put the angle on the dangle, this thing is just too bulbous. It either ends up aiming directly at my shock or bumping against the frame, trying to miss it on this side. If I bring it out enough to miss the shock on this side, then we're definitely going to have a thigh burner on hand. So, mini bike science is stepping in. This is a 1 5/16 RLV silencer. I made my own reducer from the 1 5/16 down to a 1-inch pipe. Welded it together and then slapped it with some grill paint. This fits very tight inside of this pipe. I'm going to cut a little relief right about there and then ram that puppy down there. Once it's all the way up to that flared section, I'll throw a clamp on there. There's my relief cut on the bottom. I'm just using a 1-inch RLV clamp. I cut this pipe back about another inch, and I took a 1/2 inch off the end of my RLV. Stuffed it down inside. There's about that much in there. This thing is not going to come out anytime soon. I realized that this pipe should go in to this one the way it would have done on the silencer that came with it. But hey, path of least resistance says it's coming out of there no matter what. This whole pipe has a pivot to it. Obviously, we're not going to come all the way out here. We only have 2 obstacles. Number 1, our thigh bacon. Number 2, and just as important, maybe more, is our clutch cable. This is a bit ugly, but that's okay. You're not going to see any of that. And that's because we're probably going to burn through the rest of this roll of header wrap covering things up. I've wrapped a few of these headers now, and something that I've learned is the prep work is just as important as the application of the header wrap itself. The first thing I'm going to do is sand the pipe. I'm just using a 220 grit and roughing it up. Some of you might be more proficient at this. I guess it depends if you were into chicks before you found mini bikes. Let's just say I had a pretty solid portfolio before this little adventure got off the ground. That'll do. I just tuned this section up a little bit. That way it matches this one and nobody's getting jealous. Do I dare put a hammer to this? and try to give it a little bit of the autocorrect. I dared. I'm not angry at this thing. It still has to end up on the mini bike. I just went after these ridges next to the dimples and the bends. And this wasn't even a bang. This was more of like a firm tap. If anything happened, great. If it didn't, it didn't. I wasn't trying to force it. I just received a couple products in the mail from my friends over at Super Clean, and they couldn't have come at a better time. I'm almost out of the original, and I'm definitely all out of the foaming aerosol that I had. Now this one isn't an aerosol, it's just a spray-on foam. So I'm assuming it works somewhat similar. We'll take this outside. I'll put some gloves and some goggles on and commit to spraying it down. It should foam up. Once the foam liquefies but doesn't dry, you can then rinse and clean the surface from there. This will get rid of any heavy contaminants, oils, things that aren't going to help our process. Once this is done, we're going to be painting. So it's very important that you're thorough. It's cold out, but I'm working with a warm product. I just hit it once, but I'll do it again so you can see when it comes out. It's an instant foam. That foam is going to get all up in there. And get all that gunk out. If this were greasier, we would get, a much more noticeable result, but I trust this product. I trust this brand. I just got a jug with some warm water. Now we'll go check and see if the foam is done. Pretty good. Got my rag. And we'll just wipe it down. Finish doing that inside where it's warm. I'd say that worked pretty well. It looks a little bit cleaner, but it feels a lot a bit cleaner. We're going to take it one step further and go over this with some lacquer thinner and a rag, and then straight to the paint. But oh, Fat Buddy Cat, couldn't you just skip the degreaser if you're going to use lacquer thinner? No, man. This permeates. That is fast drying and for the surface only. I'm going to take it out behind the shed and slap it around with some of this high heat silver. I'm going to paint the whole thing, silencer and all. If I was using black, I might stop somewhere around here where we are going to be using this nice dark greenish header wrap. The silver will give us some nice contrast to make it look cleaner. I'm not sure what this came off of or how it even got on my workbench, but we're going to use it. Hopefully we don't need it on something else. I don't think it's for this project. I hope it didn't come off the workbench, but it is just about the right size for an exhaust hanger. It already has one hole drilled in it. It has this neat little offset which makes it look professional, and now we just need another hole that will support our system once it's installed and we know where everything's going to sit. In the meantime, I can probably simplify this malarkey and use that top hole. I think I found a winner. This threads in right in front of the mount for the seat. I have a lock washer, a spacer, another lock washer, then our hanger, and the end of the flange bolt. If I have to move it out, I have some washers to adjust it. If I have to go longer on the bolt, we'll find something that works. The next part is going to be hanging the pipe and then figuring out where that second hole is going to be. Once we find that hole and we install the pipe, we can find the final, setting for the inside and out of this thing. That way it's sitting nice and straight. This pipe is dry to the touch. I'm just letting it come up to room temperature or slightly above. I have my bucket of water and the header wrap. Pair of scissors. I'll be wearing gloves whenever I touch this. It is fiberglass based. I'll dry wrap it. If I have some exuberant amount left over, which I don't think I will have, I'll cut it off, and whatever we do need, I'll unravel and drop in the bucket. If your forearms don't hurt, then you're not twisting tight enough. I have about a foot of extra laid out and it's twisted around a couple more times. I'm going to have to work around the clamp when we get to that. So I'll snip it off, unravel this, and drop it on in. We used about half of the amount that I had left in that box. I'm surprised. I thought we'd use more, or I actually didn't think there was that much left in there. Don't let that fool you. We still used there's 5 feet, we'll call it 5.5 times 2, 11 feet of header wrap to do this job. In the drink you go. And I'll let that simmer like 10 minutes. It'll bubble and stuff I think it gets all up in the fibers, and then somehow when you put it on the exhaust and you dry it, it binds real tight. These are the clamps I'll be using. I'm not sure how many I'll be using. I have one in my pocket. These are used, but this was the one that I think will give me less guff when it's time to do business. And that one is a, well, not that it really matters. Some of them are different. This is an 8mm on an extension. That way I can put a little torque to the twist. I have my chair next to my bucket. That's next to my pipe. And my equipment at hand. The first one is the worst one. You got to be careful that you don't start it on this side of that flange because you're not getting it back. Make sure that's in place, and I'm going to start probably like an inch or an inch and a half back from there. I'll twist it around a few times, try to make the corner, and then set my first clamp. First clamp is on. I'm making sure that I have enough room between the flange and my clamp. That way I can get in there with the wrench and do what I gotta do later on. This is super, super tight. Grab it on, and I'm putting all of it to it. I'm overlapping by a ½ inch. Making sure there's no creases and trying to be as uniform as possible. The tighter you can get it, the better it's going to look, the better it's going to stay together. When you get to the corners, you're going to burn more material. A straight line is a shorter distance, right? So you're covering a greater distance in the corner. Therefore, it uses more of the wrap. Whew. Let's hunker down. Make sure at the end of your corner that you get a nice heavy overlap. That would be a place where it could get away from you if things loosened up. Working a crease out right now. Damn it, I missed one down here, but that's also where the material's heavier. Woo! Sorry you're watching me fight this, but I'm trying to put it down. Alright. I'm just about to where the clamp is going to go. So that's going to go directly on the pipe. I'm going to set another one of these clamps up here. That way we can keep our progress. It's kind of like pushing the resume button. Or did you, I guess you used to push start first and then pause. It's been a minute. I set the clamp back a little ways and left myself plenty of room for error. We'll loosen this up. We'll give it a retorque after. At this time, I'm going to put my clamp back together and tighten it on here. Just before I give it the last of the torque thunder, I'll give it a couple bops with the rubber mallet, just to make sure it's in as deep as it can go. As soon as my clamp was tight, I went back, I unraveled, and then went forward again. I went around my clamp, came back and around again to make that nice clean transition, and now I'll wrap it a couple times just before the base of the silencer, cut it off, and get one final clamp. All of my clamps are tight and uniform. Now I'll take my scissors and I'll cut off any of these hangers. That's a long one. Yeah. Might need a new pair of gloves by now. I have the pipe back on. It's not dry yet. I'm going to leave it in front of the heater for a few hours so that it has a chance to tighten up. The Dremel made quick work out of a few of these ends that were hanging out on the clamps. I just wanted them to be, you know, kind of clean. I'll swivel this thing out, hold it in place, and figure out this hanger situation. This might work. I drilled my hole first. Now I'll cut off the excess. I just reused that band that this kit came with. Cut it short, drilled a hole through it. I'm holding it up against my hanger. There's some tension. I'm pulling up a little bit so that this thing is actually hanging. Looks good from the side. Up top, we can get our clutch cable back there. We're not touching anything. Check the oil. Cool. I'm going to take this off, clean it up, paint it black, leave this in front of the heater for a little bit. Now I'm going to go for a more permanent installation. The exhaust gasket has two sides, a flat side and a squish side. The flat side is going into the port this way so that it's up against the head itself. The squish side goes against our flange. There's my gasket sitting on top of my flange. I'll bring it into position. I'm pushing straight up. We're going to try to fill that void with a few washers. I tried 3 washers, 5 washers, and now 4 washers. I added a lock washer under the nut. Not completely tight yet. We still have to get this to a close proximity. I actually think we're going to have to go back to that long bolt. header wrap, and then rubber. I'm bringing them together on the bottom. I'll put my clamp over the top. That'll come up around and together kind of near where we need it to be. I used a longer bolt than I needed for this, but it makes it a whole lot easier. I'll tighten that up and then I'll figure this out. I just made sure I have enough thread. I can move this over about another 1/4 inch just by putting a nut in between our clamp and the hanger. So I'm going to give that a shot. You can see just how tight this is. I have a nut and a spring washer. That sets the tension on this clamp. I have a lock nut and a lock washer on this side of the nut that's already there. I'll go just like I'll pass the bolt through the hanger, and then I have this flanged lock nut I'll be using on the other side. With my ratchet on the outside and my wrench on the inside, I can now lock that nut and washer up against the hanger. Without changing the tension on this clamp. So shouldn't have any vibrations there. These are constantly pushing outwards. So here's my thoughts on that. Up here, I'm going to try my best to set this bolt as far out as I can, but I'll make sure I have plenty of threads going in. I have a longer and stronger bolt. It's fully threaded in. If it's underneath here, you can see way up here. All right, we have a lot coming through, so I'll get a nut and a lock washer on the back side of that to lock this in place. To make this stronger, I'm going to cut a spacer. I'm going to make it slightly longer so that when I'm going in, I don't max out the threads, I max out the torque, and then we'll lock nut it from the back side. The spacer controls where our exhaust goes. We could bring it in and do a spacer on this side and one on the other. We could bring it out and just do one spacer. We're far enough from our shock. If we're all the way out, I don't think we're gonna hurt it, but we can bring it in right about there. we'd be doing better. Let's check our clutch cable. Yeah, we'll be able to get by there. Plus, we're protected from the heat. So, I'm going to measure up for 2 spacers. I'll measure this one first, and then this one I'll go slightly shorter so that we can torque it in. I think I said to go short on that inside spacer, but in a way that doesn't make sense. What really doesn't make sense is when you actually cut it a little bit shorter and realize shorter doesn't eat up the threads. We're trying to torque it in. So if we go a little bit longer, we know we'll have threads. We won't run out. That way we'll have constant torque. So go like 1/8 longer. That's all. It definitely looks better than I thought it was going to. I still have to cut these hairs off on the bottom. I have my nut and lock washer up there on the back. There's tension on this. Both of these nuts are tight. I filled up that space with 3 or 4 washers. If we have any type of an exhaust leak up here, I mean, I crushed the gasket, okay? But if things wear in with heat, I can drop this flange down. We don't have to move any of this. This stays right where it's at. The flange comes down. We take a washer off of each side. We put it back up and we tighten it. When time comes that we have to change that gasket, then we just have to drop this clamp or this bolt. We don't have to do both. Wham, bam, blah, jam. Homemade performance, baby. It might look a little grassroots, but it matches this mini bike. I did this for about $75. So it might be better than what you get for $50. It might not be better than what you get for $150. But for $75, I think we did okay. This thing is going to sound amazing. In the next video, we're going to knock out the throttle and the clutch. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. I want you to stay. I want you to stay. I want you to stay. I want you to stay.